Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Legacies. This is a 1 to 6 player hand management, resource management, economic game, where you take the role of a famous person from the early 19th century building fame to leave a lasting legacy. You'll be investing in industries, building relationships, contributing to your foundation, collecting heirlooms, influencing events, and choosing successors, trying to have the longest lasting legacy. How do you have the longest lasting legacy and win the game? By having the most fame at the end of 6 generations or rounds. Now that we know what the winning condition is, let's take a look at the components set up and how gameplay works in Legacies. Now let's take a look at the components. You have the main game board. Around the outside of the main game board, you have the foundation and fame tracks. On the top left, you have the round track. In the bottom left, you have spaces for legendary figures. At the top in the middle, you have your Explore the City action with the navigation symbol. Next to that, you have the turn order track. Underneath that is an end of era aid for the turn order. On the right side of the main game board, you have the industry investment tracks. And in the bottom right, you have global action requirements to trigger the end of a generation. In the middle of the main game board, you have industry groups. This is also where you place your trade conference tiles when carrying out that global action. Outside of the industry groups, you have industries for investments. Outside of that are spaces to indicate your character icon. And outside of those, we have the relationship tracks for characters. The relationship track is at the top, and the reward and type of reward is below that track. Century player cards. On the back of the card, it has the century, 1 being red, 2 being blue, and 3 green. On the front of the card, at the top you have the title. On the top right, you have the century. Below that, you have a list of actions that you can take with this card, along with their cost and benefits. Successor cards. On the left side, you have a picture, name, impact icon, and foundation contribution. On the right side, you have the benefit. Event cards. These cards have 2 options. For each option, at the top, they have the title. To the right of the title is the century, and below that is the impact icon and effect. Solo cards, heirloom cards. On the top left, you have the resource cost. On the top right, you have the acquisition fee, if this is not your heirloom, and you are not hostile to this character. Below that, you have the picture, name, and the fame. At the bottom, you have the character, next to the industries, and then the level. Legendary figures tiles. On the left side, you have the picture. Below that, the name. And on the right side, you have a space for the relationship token and reward. Global action tiles. The red are mandatory, and the blue are non-mandatory. At the top is for everyone to carry out, and the bottom is the bonus for the person that triggered that action. Century end scoring tiles. On the top right, you have the icon. Across the top, you have the name. Below that, you have a depiction and then the description. And at the bottom, you have impact icons. Game end scoring tiles. Across the top, you have the title. Below the title, you have the depiction and description. And the very bottom, you have the impact icons. Bonus tokens, relationship overlay tiles. In the top left, you have the character. Next to that, you have the relationship reward track. Below that is a picture. And on the bottom right, you have the century. Investment overlay tiles. Exploration overlay tiles. Trade conference tiles. For the top part of the tiles, you have the resources at the very top, and then rows with amounts. The bottom tiles have the century at the very bottom, with the rewards for first and second. Industry markers, generation marker, double-sided player mats. You have the above board side and the underhanded side. On the player mat, you have a picture with an impact icon. Below the picture, you have the name, and going around the picture, you have spaces for investments and a player marker. Located either above or below, you have the special action and places for resources. Either across the bottom or across the top, you have the character and influenced industries. Below that is your starting resources, fame, gold, and foundation. Next to that, you have the amicable characters, and next to that, you have the hostile characters. Around your player board, to the left, you'll place your players' heirlooms. In the middle to the right, you'll place your successors, and to the right, you'll place other heirlooms. In each of the player colors, you have pigs, 1 to mark the foundation track, and 1 to mark the turn order track. Fame marker, bidding die, player markers, investment tokens, in majors are 5 and minors are 2, and relationship tokens. Resources, die, gear, gems, iron, gold in 1, 5, 10, 25, 100, 100, and 500. Player aids, gameplay aid, and finally, your rulebook. Now let's take a look at the setup. We're going to be setting this up for a 3-player game, which takes 11 general steps and 6 player steps. Step 1, place the main board in the center of the play area. Step 2. Sort and place industry markers. Sort the industry markers by color and group and place them in the corresponding column on 3 gold. Step 3. Place the generation marker on generation 1 in the top left of the main board. Step 4. Create supply pools for gold, dye, gear, gems, and iron next to the main board, along with overlay tiles and trade conference tiles. Step 5. Shuffle and place player cards. Shuffle each century's player cards and place them face down next to the main board and next to the player card market. Step 6. Shuffle and place the successor deck next to the main board. Step 7. Shuffle the bonus tokens and place them to the side to use in the player setup. Step 8. Shuffle and place legendary figures. Shuffle the legendary figures, placing 3 face up on the Century 1 spaces in the bottom left of the main board, and 1 on the Century 2 and 3 spaces face down. Step 9. Place the global action tiles face up along the bottom of the board. Step 10. Place scoring tiles. Place a century end and game end scoring tile face up to the left side of the main board. Then place the remaining scoring tiles next to those tiles. Step 11. Create and draw the event deck. Create the event deck by drawing 2 random Century 3 events face down, and then 2 random Century 2 events to place on top of those, and then 2 random Century 1 events to place on top. Then you'll place them next to the main board and draw the top card face up next to the deck. The player steps. Step 1. Get a player aid. Shuffle and randomly give each player a player aid. Step 2. Get a character, place your player mat, and bonuses. In player aid order, lowest to highest, select a character and take the corresponding player mat to place in the center of your player area, with either the above board or underhanded side up. It is recommended for your first game to use the above board side. Then place a random bonus token on each character's relationship track on the main board. Step 3. Get player components. Choose a color and get the corresponding pigs, fame marker, bidding cube, player markers, investment tokens, and relationship tokens. Step 4. Place player components. Place 3 major and 3 minor investment tokens and 5 relationship tokens on their corresponding spaces on your player mat. Place the bidding cube and a player marker on your player mat, placing the other player marker on the shaded circle near your character icon on the main board. Place a foundation marker or pig on the foundation track number indicated on your player mat. And then you would place the other pig next to the turn order track. Place your fame marker or star on the fame track at the number indicated on your player mat. Step 5. Get starting resources. Get the gold and resources indicated on your player mat. Step 6. Get and place heirlooms. Get the heirloom cards matching your character and place the level 0 to the left of your player mat. Then place the remaining in level order across the top of your player mat, orange side up. For a 2-player game, you'll have to set up a 3rd character following the setup in the rulebook. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game consists of 3 centuries. This is made up of 2 generations per century for a total of 6 generations or rounds. After each century, you will score the century end scoring tile, and after the last century, we will go through the game end scoring tiles. A generation consists of 3 phases: start, action, and end. Generation start. This is carried out in 6 steps. Step 1, determine the turn order. The foundation size determines the turn order, largest to smallest. If tied, you would keep the order for the tied players from the previous generation. Step 2, move and draw events. Move the upcoming event to the current event space and draw the top card to the upcoming event space. Step 3, deal 3 player cards from the current century deck to each player. Step 4, deal 3 player cards face up to the right side of the board to create the player card market. Step 5, deal 1 successor to each player. You would not do this in Generation 6. Step 6, turn 2 successors face up next to the deck. You would not do this in the 6th generation. Once you carry out these 6 steps, we move to the actions. Generation actions. In turn order, players will take a player action using a player card or trigger a global action. Global actions are only available after you play at least 2 player cards in a generation. Player actions. You would play a card from your hand and take one of the actions from that card, or swap a player card from your hand with one from the market and play that card, placing the card in front of you. There are 6 types of player actions. Relationships, or the handshake symbol. This is where you make relationships with characters and they give you benefits. These relationships will weaken over time. To make a relationship, you would play a card depicting that character, paying the cost, penalties, or bonuses, place an available relationship token on the leftmost space on the corresponding character's relationship track. If another token is on that space, you would move it to the right, then you would collect the benefit depicted under your space, and if there is a bonus present, you would earn the bonus. When making relationships, you need to be aware of the amicable characters, which is the green on the player mat, and you would not pay a cost. And for hostile, which are red on your player mat, they would cost you 2 fame. For legendary figures, you would pay the cost and place a relationship token on that tile. If another player was present, you would replace their token. Then you would get the bonus, and the other player will get a player card from the deck or a successor card from the deck if they haven't put one in play this generation. If you play a card that has your matching character symbol in the relationship, you would get to take a special action or wild for your character relationship. You would pay the cost, and then you can perform your special action or make a relationship anywhere you don't have a relationship ignoring modifier. Keep in mind that players cannot have a relationship token on their track, or two active on the same track, or more than 2 legendary figures unless a card lets you do so. Relationship tokens cannot be removed unless they are bumped off a track or an ability on a card or player map. The second type of action, investments. This is the money bag symbol. This allows you to capitalize on investments. The industries that you can invest in are government, progress, and entertainment. To buy or sell investments, you would play a card with the industry or group you wish to buy or sell, choose to buy or sell a major or minor investment, pay or collect the gold value of the industry multiplied by the shares sold or bought, place the token in the industry on the main board, or retrieve the token, and then finally increase or decrease the value of that industry shares 1 or 2 spaces based on if it was a minor or major investment. Your influenced industries on your player mat are wild for you when on a card. You can only place or retrieve 1 token at a time. You can only have 1 minor and 1 major in each industry. The industry value won't change when placing, replacing, or moving through other cards or actions. And also keep in mind that shares increase each generation due to inflation. The third type of action is opportunities. This is the light bulb symbol. You would play a card, pay the cost, and gain the reward. The fourth type of action is explore the city, or the navigation icon. You would play a player card, collect all the rewards shown in the exploration space, depending on the century. The fifth action, obtain resources. Play a card and get the depicted resources at the bottom. The sixth action, acquire an heirloom. This is the hand with a card symbol. You would play a player card, pay the cost listed to the bank, and pay an acquisition fee if it belonged to another player, as long as that character is not hostile. If you have a relationship token on that character's track, you would pay 1 less resource. Then you would flip the heirloom card over and place it to the left of your player mat if it is your heirloom card, or you would place it orange side up to the right of your player mat if it is another player's heirloom card. Keep in mind that you can only have 1 heirloom from each opponent, and level 6 do not count for this limit. Also, you can only have 1 of each level, and level 6 can only be acquired when you have 1 through 5. If you get your own level 6, you will gain fame and not income. If you get an opponent's level 6, you don't pay an acquisition fee and can use their special ability. For a special ability or action, you will either play a card with your character's icon in the relationship, play a card with a special ability in the opportunity, or a successor with that action. When you put a successor in play, the old successor would retire, and if a successor matches your impact icon on your player mat, you would get a benefit. For the first through third successor that matches, you would get a relationship or investment token to your player mat. For the fourth and fifth, you would be able to perform your special ability immediately. Once you have played 2-player cards this generation, you may start triggering global actions as an action for your turn. These provide a benefit for all players and an extra benefit for the player triggering the global action. After carrying out the action, you would flip the tile over. For the mandatory global actions, these must be played for the generation to end. For the first global action you would play each generation, you would gain a successor card. Then you can put any successor from your hand in play, discarding unplayed successors. There are 2 mandatory global actions. Resolve the current event, you would trigger to influence an event. You would move an event card to the resolved events space in the upper left corner of the main board. Choose an option and orient the card so the chosen outcome is on top. In generations 1 through 4, player with the least fame selects a scoring tile with the matching icon as the event. In generations 1 and 3, it would be a century end scoring tile. And in generations 2 and 4, it would be a game end scoring tile. The second mandatory global action is advance relationships and collect benefits. The triggering player selects a relationship token to collect the benefit, and then advances all relationship tokens to the right 1 space, and any that go off their relationship track would go back to their owner. Then the relationship tokens collect benefits on the tracks and legendary figures. The non-mandatory global actions generate heirloom income, generate heirloom fame, contribute to your foundation, influence industries, collect dividends, and host a trade conference. Players would continue taking turns until both mandatory global actions have been triggered and a number of non-mandatory global actions based on the number of players. In a 1 or 2 player game, 2. In a 3 or 4 player game, 3. And in a 5 or 6 player game, 4. When that occurs, we move to the generation end. This is carried out in 4 steps. Step 1, turn bonus. Any players on the turn order after the player who ended the generation gets to choose a bonus based on the generation. These options are located under the turn order track. You can gain one of the 3 options based on the century, so gold, foundation, or resources. Step 2, in generations 1 through 5, players who didn't put a successor in play must do so now. You must do so from your hand if you can, or from the top of the deck. Then you turn all global actions face up, discard the player card market, played player cards, and unplayed successors. Step 3, at the end of generations 2, 4, and 6, you would perform the century end. And then step 4, advance the generation marker. Generations would continue until the end of the 2nd, 4th, and 6th generation, where we end the century. When you end the current century, you would remove all player cards from the current century from play. You would score fame based on the century end scoring tile, and after centuries 1 and 2, turn up the legendary figure for the next century and place relationship, investment, and exploration overlays on the board. And generations and centuries would continue until the end of the 3rd century. At the end of the 3rd century, we would go to the final scoring. Final scoring takes 5 steps. Step 1, score fame for game end scoring tiles. Step 2, score 1 fame for each 25 in gold in your foundation. Step 3, score 1 fame for every 100 gold you have. Step 4, score 1 fame for each resource you have. And step 5, score fame equal to the level of each heirloom you acquired. Once all players have totaled their fame, the player with the most fame has left the longest lasting legacy and wins Legacies.